Hello, last night was a great night for Switzerland. Our national team drew 1-1 against Brazil. It's a great achievement, but we can't relax too long because markets are still very much active. Today we'll look at Euro-US dollar and its influence, especially on European equity markets. We'll also touch on our new cryptocurrencies coverage. We'll first start with the daily graph of the S&P 500. It gives us the perspective over the next 2-3 months, and at the moment it is still uptrending. Our targets are saying that the S&P 500 could possibly reach back towards the stop and probably make it above them, even surpassing the 2,900 level. At the moment, the risk index is resuming up, and it's still quite far from the overbought zone, so there is some leeway to still continue up. Our target timing for top here is possibly sometime during the second half of July, perhaps early August. Now we look at Europe, which had been faring very well this spring until the Italian crisis hit, and it has given quite a big dent to this uptrend. Now, according to our trend analysis, we're still heading up at the moment, and we could still also here on European markets retest the highs from last year and possibly make it above them. At the moment, the risk index justifies this bullish view because we are quite close to the oversold zone and our risk index seems to be turning up. Now, it's interesting to look at the euro because the first euro down phase, at least until mid-May, corresponded to very strong European equity markets. That said, then the bad news came from Europe, and especially from Italy, with the political crisis that we've just seen. And over the last 2 weeks of May, we actually saw European markets crashing with the euro. Now the question is, if we see more further weakness ahead in the euro, which our trend analysis is telling us, we're still in a bear trend, and we could possibly make it towards the range of 114 towards 111, and we believe that target brings us pretty much towards midsummer, so towards also end July, early August. So if the euro continues lower, what happens with European markets? And that's the analysis we'll try to perform over the next few slides. Now before we do that, just continuing on Euro-US dollar, just to recap our analysis, this is the weekly graph or the perspective over the next 2 to 4 quarters, and we could see that the euro bounced back up from end 2016, but it never really made it above our corrective targets towards the 125 mark, meaning that at the moment this move up from end of 2016 is labeled only as a correction, and that correction may have started to reverse down lower. Now on the daily graph, the downtrend is now pretty clear to see, and as we just mentioned, it could continue possibly towards midsummer and towards the 114, 111 range. Now the hourly graph is also downtrending at the moment, following the huge sell-off that we saw late last week. We don't believe it's quite oversold yet, but the targets, you probably have another figure of risk over the next week or so. But we could well imagine a bounce perhaps towards the end of the month and then a new downtrend which could materialize during July. Now just looking at the culprit of the euro weakness towards the end of May, and that was the Italian market, and this is the FTSE MIB index. First, the long term is still, for what it's worth, is still uptrending. Now we'll see if it's able to regain its momentum. The daily graph, the medium term over the next few months, we believe is still moving lower, and we also have that target in time towards the month of August for a low. We could see that the risk index has come down quite a bit, so that means possibly most of the sell-off is behind us, but it could still move lower a bit more towards that date. And then the hourly graph is trying to consolidate up. It would really need to make it above the 22,520 to accelerate up further. We believe it could probably attempt some kind of a bounce towards the end of the month, but should come under pressure again coming July. Now, it's not only Southern Europe which is suffering and Italy, but we also saw quite a bit of difficulties in Eastern Europe. And Eastern Europe also has its political difficulties with the European Union, but also it's still developed emerging markets, as we could call it. And what we could say is that the dollar strength since the spring has taken its toll on the Polish index, and you could see quite a nice correction here on the weekly, a move down on the daily, which is possibly not over. It's quite oversold at the moment, so could see a slight bounce possibly towards the end of the month, but should remain under pressure probably towards midsummer. And into here, the hourly is moving lower again. It's probably not quite finished yet, but we could also imagine that bounce towards the end of this week into early July. So if we look at emerging markets more globally, we are in a downtrend since the dollar started to turn up. And we could see that again here, this downtrend doesn't seem quite over. We're not quite oversold on the risk index, and we could probably reach a further 10–15% lower towards the month of August. So for us, the big question for European markets is the risk coming from elsewhere, perhaps from emerging markets, which is going to strengthen the dollar, weaken the euro, but without having its causes in Europe. And in that case, European markets could be quite strong and benefit from a stronger US dollar, as they did during the month of March, April, and early May. Or are the problems coming again from Europe? And in that case, European markets should be falling with the euro. Now, if we look at the relative graph of the euro stocks versus emerging markets, what we can see is that this was the European crisis, and it was a counter trend in this move. But we could see that at the moment we're in a strong bullish trend for European markets versus emerging markets. And that seems to tell us that if the dollar strengthens again, it's more a dollar story than a euro weakness story, and that the impact should probably be stronger on emerging markets than on Europe. So given that, can we invest in Europe at the moment? Well, we've put a few European markets here, and we can see that the CAC recently made new highs, and it's still trending up, and it will probably be our preferred market in Europe at the moment. Then the DAX has not made new highs, but it's still trending up. Risk index is quite low, so it could also have quite a bit of potential. And we would still be a bit wary of the fringe, meaning of Southern Europe or Italy here, or Poland, which, although it's oversold, could continue lower into August. So clearly our view is that, yes, further dollar strength probably means that European markets will outperform, but we would focus on the core of Europe rather than the fringe. So now we also wanted to present our new cryptocurrencies coverage. It's a separate directory on our FinGraphs website, fingraphs.com, and you can see that we have a directory with main cryptocurrencies, and we also thought it was interesting to compare every single one of the 10 large cryptos that we've chosen against the other cryptocurrencies. Now, once you go into a directory, and this is the main cryptocurrencies directory, you could view each crypto as a standalone, but you could also view mosaics of all the cryptos together over different time frames, and that allows you to see the correlation and coordinate the projections across the different instruments. We have the availability of a 5 seconds update up to a long-term update when it is available on a weekly basis. Now, for example, on Bitcoin, we do have a weekly, and at the moment we've seen a strong correction down since December. We still think it may be an uptrend, although we'll put some caveating on that and prefer to concentrate on our shorter term time frames. And if we look at the daily, for the time being, we're still descending, and we probably have pretty much the same targets as we currently have on the euro, possibly towards mid-summer for a downtrend. That said, we're very much oversold at the moment, so as with the instruments we've previously viewed, we could well imagine a rebound, probably starting this week into early July. And what we could see on the hourly is that we're probably getting ready for this rebound because we've reached our targets down and our risk index is very much oversold. Now, this is a directory where we compare Ethereum to the other cryptocurrencies. You could obviously in our directories also sort by performance over various lengths of period. And in each directory, you also have our live signals which update. Here on the comparisons, we only go down to a trader's view, but if you look at the main Bitcoins directory, the signals actually activate up to a super scalper's view, so up to a 5 seconds update. And you could also put up the mosaic of Ethereum here compared to the different other cryptos, and we can see that it is moving up towards against most of them, and that means that Ethereum is probably still quite a defensive crypto. For example, versus Bitcoin, well, we're in a bit of a status quo where Ether had moved down, but it's probably building a base here to start to correct up. We also show here Ether in US dollars and Korean won, and among the directory we also have it in euros and in Japanese yen. So please don't hesitate, fingraphs.com, to discover that new cryptocurrency directory. Thank you very much and have a very good week.